Hi guys, this is Jordan with Motion Array, and so far we've gone over a lot of different tools, effects, and techniques to use in the editing process. Things like how to key out a green screen, how to get good quality audio, and how to make custom lower thirds. But we've yet to talk about even some of the most basic principles of editing. Straight up, editing is powerful. It absolutely makes or breaks your project. Depending on the decisions you make, you can potentially push your audience away instead of drawing them in, or you could potentially confuse them instead of conveying a clear message. So the question is, how do you make sure that your editing produces a good video instead of a bad one? The truth is, that takes time, patience, and a lot of practice. But there are some basic principles that can help even the freshest editor start out on the right track. So today, we're gonna go over 5 basic principles of editing video. Whether you're an absolute beginner or a seasoned editor, I hope you can take something away from it. So let's get started. Number 1, don't jump cut, unless you have a really good reason. If you've spent any amount of time on YouTube, you've probably seen jump cuts being used before. It's when cuts are made in the video between shots that are pretty much identical, but with only minor change. Unless you're a vlogger, you probably want to avoid this from happening. Having a shot that's too similar to another one that you're cutting from comes across as jarring. And unless you're making a specific stylistic choice, it feels like a mistake. There's 2 ways to help avoid this. Try to either choose a shot to cut to with a significantly different focal length, or by changing the angle that you're viewing your subject from by at least 45 degrees, or some combination of those two. If you're absolutely stuck with only one camera angle, hopefully you've shot at a higher resolution, like 4K for example. By doing so, you can actually digitally zoom in to help differentiate your 2 clips after a cut. Breaking the fourth wall a little bit here, that's actually what I'm doing in this video that you're watching, starting with a wider angle and then cutting to a shot that I've just digitally zoomed in. As long as you're exporting your project in a lower resolution than you've shot at, your audience shouldn't really be able to tell the difference. The bottom line is that this is a really effective way to hide your cuts and to give your project more flow. Number 2, use good B-roll. Undoubtedly, there will be times when you want to avoid jump cuts like we just talked about, but you've already shot everything and you have no other shots of your subject to be able to use. This is where B-roll is an absolute lifesaver. B-roll is supplemental or alternative footage that's intercut with your main shots. For example, if you're interviewing somebody about their time as an athlete and you want to hide a jump cut, you can insert some footage of them playing their sport and then cut back to the subject afterwards. This not only hides your jump cut, but it also gives additional context to what your subject is referring to. A lot of times, giving a visual reference to the things you're talking about will drastically improve your audience engagement and understanding of the material. Number 3, cut on motion. One of the goals of editing is to make the experience of watching a film or video so engaging that the audience actually forgets they're watching something on a screen. Poorly edited cuts can result in the viewer being brought out of that experience and made fully aware that, oh yeah, I'm watching a video. So how do you hide your cuts? Or maybe a better way to say it is, how do you make your cuts enhance your project rather than distract from it? One simple way is to do what's called cutting on motion. When something happens on screen that involves a lot of motion, choose that point of motion to make your cut. If you're making a narrative film, typically you'll end up getting another shot from a different angle that can follow through on that same action. But keep in mind, this has been used in film not just to cut between things in the same scene, but also as a way to cut between something else entirely. This principle of cutting on action is the same reason why it feels good when you cut on the beat of a song. It gives flow and helps to hide your cut in the presence of another attention-grabbing event. So get creative and try cutting on motion. Number 4, the 180-degree rule. This rule is pretty straightforward and typically applies to situations of dialogue between 2 or more people. Keep in mind though, this requires you to have shot your materials properly in advance. Draw a mental line between your 2 subjects. If you have only one subject, draw a line between them and the object of their focus. Now choose which side of the line you want to film from, and only film angles from that side of the axis. A good example of this is the over-the-shoulder shot reverse shot. Filming your subject from one angle and then filming the other subject from the reverse. The result is that if you were to take these 2 shots and merge them together, you'd see that the subjects are looking towards each other. This helps when cutting back and forth between shots of your 2 subjects so that your audience can keep an understanding of where they are looking in relation to the world that you're putting them in. If you break this rule by crossing over the line, the results can be disorienting and can cause a lot of confusion. So don't cross the line. But you're not stuck if you choose to film this way. If you want the scene to progress and move on in the same location, simply give a visual shot of the situation changing between the 2 subjects. It really helps to have a continual shot starting from one side of the axis and then crossing over in one shot. This way you're guiding the audience through the change, and it helps to prevent disorientation. And when you're in the editing room, choosing shots on the same side of the axis will help to keep your audience from getting confused. And number 5, what's your motivation? This last rule is basically a miscellaneous category to help tie up any loose ends. Basically, if you're making a decision about showing any piece of footage, cutting away from another shot, or any other decision that impacts the tone of your video, ask yourself this question: What's my motivation for doing this? Let's say we're editing a romantic comedy where we see a shot of somebody doing a very normal task and then they look over to see something. You then decide to cut over to the shot of what's in the next room. This is where we stop and ask ourselves the question, what's our motivation? Why am I going over to this new shot? The reason right now is because we're giving context to what our subject is experiencing. It helps to get a bigger picture of what's going on in the world of the video. But let's take a step back. Let's use the same footage and pretend we're editing a horror movie. We see our subject doing the same thing, but now we stop and ask ourselves, what's our motivation? Right now, it's to build suspense. So we don't want to show the audience what our subject is experiencing. We want to keep our audience in the dark and let their imagination take over. This is why some people say subjectively, there's no right or wrong choice, there's just stronger and weaker choices. Here we can see that using the same footage in two different situations can give a very different outcome just based on one change in decision. So ask yourself, what's my motivation and what would be a stronger choice for my production? And you know what? Let's do a bonus rule. Left to right and right to left. This one is way less obvious, but it can actually have a big impact on your production on a subconscious level. As a general rule, we tend to see things going from left to right as moving forwards, and we tend to see things going from right to left as moving backwards. So for example, if your subject is walking from left to right, you're giving subconscious signals to your audience that they're progressing forward, traveling to a new location, or maybe moving on to a new life situation, or confronting somebody that they're in conflict with. Whereas if you film them going from the reverse direction, you're giving signals that they're regressing or going backwards in their situation. Maybe they're making poor life decisions, or maybe they're returning home from a trip. The direction you give for your subject to move can give subconscious cues to your audience about the deeper parts of their situation. But you might think that you have no control over this in the editing room. I mean, if the footage is already shot, you can't magically make them go in the opposite direction, right? Well, actually you can. Keep in mind though, this can only work if there's no giant glaring things in your shot that can only be read in one direction, like a big sign with words on it. But if you go to your effects panel and choose flip horizontal, now with one effect, you've changed the subconscious signal of your clip. And as long as your subject doesn't have any glaringly obvious facial features like a birthmark on only one side of their face, your audience will probably never notice the change. And guys, that's it. Those are some basic principles when it comes to editing video. I hope that you've been able to take something away from this, regardless of how long you've been editing for. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.